I'm Matthew Buckley Smith, and you're listening to Slee Rickets. Thank you all for listening. Thank you for bearing with me a little bit this past week. I am back in town from the ALSCW conference. It was a good conference, pretty fucking exhausting. I am definitely coming down with something, but it was lovely to see, and hopefully not directly infect lots of past and future Slee Rickets guests. I learned some things, had some good conversations, went to a lot of panels, some good, some deadly boring. I sat across from Chris Wyman, who gave a reading, and who had dinner with him and some other ALCW notables. I was like I was the traveling companion. I was along like the organ grinder's monkey, as Ryan ran the show. But I slid a Slee Rickets sticker across the table to Christian Wyman, and he gave me a big beatific Yale Divinity School smile, and he slid it right back to me. So no luck there, but I'm not sure this was his style anyway. I have a really good episode for you this week. This is the first part of a conversation Cameron and I had with Matt Wall, who wrote an ongoing. He's continued to write an amazing series of intermittently angry, critical emails about everything that we get wrong in the show, but he was a whole lot of fun to talk to. Very sweet, generous guy with a lot of totally fucking balls to the wall, not just bonkers ideas about poetry. So he is just as wrong as he claims I am, but I do quite enjoy him. We had a great conversation. It was very long, so I'm going to put the rest of this out in another part or two, but I think you will enjoy it. He had a series of numbered claims or arguments that he'd set down ahead of time. So we sort of go through those. It takes us quite a while, so I think we may only get to the first one in this episode, but we talk about writing poetry, reading poetry, talking about reading and writing poetry, and a bunch of other stuff. There were a number of interruptions, both from my daughters, like quite a few of those, particularly at times that were real difficult to edit around, and then Cameron had a little bit of trouble with his mic. So we have a few sort of funny cuts in and out, but with luck, it should all be fairly easy to follow. If you like what you hear, please do go to sleerickets.substack.com and sign up for the Secret Show there. If you've already signed up for the Secret Show, I definitely owe you an episode or two, and that is coming. So sorry for the delay. It has been a hell of a month, but I will be getting to that post haste. Is there anything else? I'll put links to Matt Wall has a podcast. He has a website. He has a million other things, YouTube, all that stuff. So I'll put links to his website with all that information in the show notes. You can reach me as always at sleerickets@gmail.com. Anything else? Oh, one more thing. Why the fuck does New Haven smell like weed? Everywhere we went, it smelled like skunky weed. And at one point, we were standing outside a pizza joint, and some kids were literally smoking weed, and it smelled so much fresher and smoother than what we've been smelling all over town. So you're not going to convince me that it is actually just the smell of weed everywhere. Nowhere is that suffused in shitty weed. You're also not going to convince me that it's actual skunks. When I'm driving through a rural southern highway at night, when I'm driving, with the windows down, I smell skunk. Then I assume it's skunk. Does New Haven have skunks like that? I don't know, man. But something smells like fucking skunky weed all over New Haven. And don't tell me, as Josiah Cox already did, lovely, brilliant guy, but I can't believe he's right about this. He told me it was the Bradford pear trees. I know Bradford pear trees. Bradford pear trees, I'm sorry, Josiah, but they smell like cum. And cum and weed do not smell the same. I have that on excellent authority. Anyway, if you are a Yaley and you have an answer, do let me know. Otherwise, please enjoy this conversation with Cameron and Matt Wall of IHateMattWall.com, etc. Wild guy. Really fucking wild. But I guess we can start, if you want, with just, you gave us a list of 3 main points. Do you have those in front of you, or do you want me to read just down the list to start?
I can pull them up if you'd like.
And
Is this the manifesto poem thing?
you can, yeah, because you had, and some of it was, and I also may have broken it up incorrectly, because some of it you have in like poem form, or it wasn't clear always if it was like bullet form. And we should say you mentioned that you came to Sleeve Rickets by way of Alice's friend Eleanor,
Yeah.
who's been on Poetry Says a couple times, is very entertaining to listen to, and then also does YouTube videos, which you do. You're on. There's book YouTube, which I don't. I only know of it, but it's its own hot little like ecosystem.
It's what it is. It's okay.
Okay. But you started writing very charming but furious emails to me about everything that we were getting wrong, which seemed to be...
Dude, seriously,
yeah.
It was just that one episode. I think if I would have came to you guys on a different episode, I would have been like, oh, this is great. We're just like, this is fantastic. But it was just like everything that makes me furious
Right.
about the poetry world. You guys all seem to hit within like 15 minutes. And it was like, it was like the perfect storm of like the things that drive me nuts. And so I'm looking for this thing right now. I'm sorry it's taking me so long.
But I've had a similar experience with some of my favorite podcasts. I often would coming in, I knew there was a topic I was interested in or something, but then I would find one or more of the hosts infuriatingly annoying for a while, until I then eventually, in a way, it helps to get a sense of a ground level, a sense of where they're coming from, in order to then read the comments on top of that. But when you're coming in cold, it can just be
the plus side for you guys, and not to suck your guys' dicks too hard here, but you guys are seriously enjoyable to listen to. You don't sound and it's so funny because you guys say all the time, I'm not trying to sound pretentious, but and you guys don't come off as pretentious. That's the thing. And a lot of people who talk about this stuff come off so fucking horrible that you just don't want to fucking listen to them. So the fact that you guys don't makes it and honestly, most of the guests, I haven't hit all of your guests or anything that yet. But for the most part, everyone you talk to has sounded very pleasant to be around. So that's a plus.
Yeah, excellent. And I know a lot of people who listen disagree with almost everything. So I'm always happy to have. I do I got an email from a guy who was like, "Please talk about this." Then he was like, "I it's so great to have a podcast I disagree with so strongly and so often." I was like, "So you want us to talk about this topic that you just named in order to hear what you don't agree with?" So but I'm glad to have them. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, please. If you would just read. I asked you to distill some of your thoughts or objections into a few points we could build off of, and then you sent a list of a few things, but you had these 3 main points.
Okay, and you want me to hit those?
Yeah, you just start with one, and we'll go from there.
That's not what I wanted to do. So, poetry is art, therefore it has to be judged subjectively. Form is a method on which academia can put rules on art in order to judge it objectively. Once this happens, it ceases to be art.
All right. I think they're 3.5 or 4 separate claims. And I definitely agree with some of them. But if I can try to break it down to the best of my understanding, I think we all are with you on poetry as art. Though I wonder, based on some of the other things you've said, if maybe we... I'll spoil it here a little bit. I have a theory that some of what we may disagree on is... It may just be a matter of what we're calling poetry. I think it may just be a question of what you want from poetry, or what you want to think of when you say poetry at large, and I suspect it may just be that we're sort of talking about, there's a Joe Winderoth line, we were on the same ball field but we were playing different games. Mm-hmm. So it may be something like that, or it may even be that we were on different ball fields but we thought we were playing the same game. Something more like that, maybe. But Cameron, do you have any? Because I know you've spent a lot of time arguing with your friends about art and subjectivity. Do you have any thoughts off the top of your head?
I mean, I spent a lot of time arguing with one friend about the subject.
Mm.
The other friends don't give a shit. But right. So let's take the first one. So poetry must be judged subjectively. Sure. So what I'd ask is like, so this is it. So Matthew, you made a point about like the connection between all poetry giving some pleasure and then like dick sucking gives most people
So
pleasure.
much
We'll say
trouble
most
from that
now,
comment.
but like yeah.
Yeah.
We can't be totally completist. But do you think so, Matt? Do you think there's any way that a poem can be judged that, or like any criteria that you could critique a poem on that without just saying I subjectively like it or I subjectively don't like it? Like, is there, because like
Yeah.
I go to
I
like
mean, there.
critiquing websites and I'm like I critique poems all the time. So can you critique a poem if you just think that all poetry is subjective and just some people like it and some people don't?
If you are judging it based on the things that have been put together as far as like form and meter and rhyme and consonants and assonance and all this other stuff, if you put all that shit in there, then yeah, you can judge it. But what I'm saying and what like my big beef is, the whole reason why those things are there and why forms are taught is so things could be judged objectively, which they shouldn't be in the first place, is my big argument. Because once you start judging art objectively, it ceases to become art and it becomes fact. So instead of being taught in literature class, it should be taught in math class, because math is facts. Like, you can't argue math. So if you're going to put like rules on things to where you can't argue it, that's what you would have to do with that.
I wonder if we could, because I think some of the difficulty here is in the hard dichotomy between subjectivity and objectivity. Like, I think I think we're with you in that like nobody would really want poetry to be taught as math. I mean, there are
Right.
techniques that are as you said objective and that you can sort of measure and identify in crisp, more or less inarguable terms. But I think that subject, like, because I think Cameron gets in a good point when you say like art has to be poetry has to be judged subjectively. That does seem almost like a contradiction in terms. Like, if it is subjective the way you mean it, then judging is almost out the window.
Exactly.
And
I think critiquing is wrong. Like, I think
okay,
like poetry critique, literature critique, the whole thing, like that is something that should never happen in the first place.
literary criticism at large
It's gone. Yeah.
Okay, all right, okay. So then, like, I guess like where my mind goes with this question is something like food. So,
Mm-hmm.
not that I have any special love for like food critics, say, but I wonder, and like, and I'm a terrible cook, but there are a couple things I make pretty well, and I, I'm just thinking about like if you were to have a basic, I would at some point maybe kind of enjoy in like a boring suburban dad way taking a cooking class, like learning how to make a few things, and I do think that taste has a lot to do with it. Like, there's plenty of stuff I like that other people don't like, and vice versa,
Mm-hmm.
but there's also such a thing as like a good version of one of those dishes or not. And I do think that if I took a cooking class, I would hope that the teacher could help me make something that tasted better rather than worse for what it was. Like, I think you're right. Like, it has to be tasted by some individual person's tongue, and nobody can say from one person to another, you like this or you don't like this. But it's also not quite true to say that it's sort of all up for grabs and there's no correlation.
Well,
there's
let me
nothing
use,
predictable. There's nothing learnable in there, right?
Let me use what you're saying here, because if we go by this, would you consider a chef more of a genius, let's say, if he's reading a recipe and following the recipe exactly to make the dish that the recipe says to make,
Mm-hmm.
or if the chef goes into the kitchen, sees whatever's in there, grabs whatever the fuck he wants, makes whatever the fuck he's making, and then it ends up being edible? because then like we're not talking about like whether the food tastes good or not, because that depends on everyone's palate,
Sure.
but just the act of the making, like which
Right.
one is better.
Well, I think that I think see where you're going, and I guess I would just add in a couple of qualifications, which is that I suspect that it's probably not all one or all the other, even with cooks. Like I suspect that probably even the best improviser, even the best person to find whatever shit's in your fridge and make something cool out of it, has
Yeah.
probably had a lot of really rigorous training leading up to that, and has probably
Right, like
learned
it's
how to, but then beyond that, I think
like the
it's sort
recipe
of
before the improviser.
right, yeah, like
Like
has
it's
done a
like
lot of
one leads to
recipe
the second.
cooking.
Yeah.
Like probably like if you only ever do recipe cooking, then you're limited as a cook, like as a chef. Like you have a real limitation. There's still like people who only cook from recipes and make lots of food that I like, and I think that's probably most people who cook most food. But like you are definitely limited if that's all you ever do. If you never go from there to any kind of invention or improvisation on your own. But I would also say that like even before I could answer your first question on the terms given, it still totally matters what the result is like. Because like, would I rather have the guy who follows the boring recipe cook something that tastes pretty good, or would I rather have the genius improvise something that's garbage? Like, it does sort of matter how good it is at the end. Like, you can't separate those things. I don't think.
But that thing that you're talking about right there, that's a personal preference. Because like Cameron was talking about earlier, like I fucking love McDonald's fries.
Right.
You can eat fucking McDonald's
Well,
fries.
I don't, but that's, but you're, but like, you're not, but that's also not your unique, like, esoteric view. Like, McDonald's fries are universally beloved. Like, of course. Like, that's not like, you're not like a punk rock critic there. Like, sorry, yeah. Where were we? What were we eating?
We were talking about French fries and how my argument was shit.
No, I don't think your argument's shit, but I think like it's not like that. It's a matter of personal taste doesn't mean that there's nothing we can agree on, or there's nothing we could say broadly about like it isn't meaningless to say, oh, he's a good cook,
Yeah.
right? Like that part of what's entailed in there is like, however he makes the things he makes, they end up being good to eat. At least enough people agree. Like there's something that we share in our experience of that, right?
Like the edible thing, like that seems, isn't that like too extreme? Like I swear, isn't urine edible? But
Urine?
like almost no one likes urine.
I think people like
No, that's
no
not
one
true
likes
at all.
urine.
A lot of people do.
Like,
Okay.
do they? Okay, I stand corrected.
But I also think
I'm
like
trying
as
to
with
say that,
McDonald's French fries, the consensus view might be that urine is not a universal favorite. maybe you do have
people don't like it.
yeah, you have niche taste if you like urine, and maybe you have niche taste if you dislike McDonald's French fries. You know, maybe those things can both.
And we're not judging you for either. Like if any of our listeners do like urine, or don't like fries, but like if you cook a meal and it's really cold, it's still edible. But like a lot of people are gonna say it's cold. And also, if you cook a meal and the potatoes are really like overdone, almost everyone's gonna say they're overdone. So, like, I don't know.
Yeah, and I'm sure we could all say
an analogy.
No, because I'm sure we could all say we've read poems that were like cold chili. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
A lot of the time.
But I think but that's sort of what we're. I think like that's where I tend to I do tend to think that individual experience matters enormously in poetry, and that there's no way sort of ultimately absolutely to account for every experience and to say this is right or this is wrong. You certainly can't measure it the way you can measure hard sciences or that stuff. But I also think it's not just like totally random in particular. There are some tendencies. Like there are things that we can say tend to please the ear more than others. Like I don't think that you would run into a lot of disagreement with this kind of suggestion in something like pop music or rap or when a lot of people do there are people who would say this is the best rapper, no, this is the best rapper. I know Cameron's number one is Aesop Rock, and other people would say someone else, but like you probably it's not an accident that lots of people say like, oh yeah, these 5 guys are all pretty fucking good, right? That's not just because of some statistical anomaly, right?
Yeah.
So why would that not be true with poetry? I guess why would that not be true with literature?
Well, I'm not saying that it's not. I'm just saying, like, because you have the people who are like, because I think what you're like, what's the word here? What you're combining is popularity and critical acclaim, which are two completely separate things. And in the poetry world, there is no real popularity. And I think a lot of that comes from the way poetry has been presented by the academics over the years.
I totally agree with you there. I think I'm in complete agreement with what you said just there. Well, Cameron, do you want to make a distinction?
Well, like, no, because I can't make any. Like, so, okay, let's talk about. So I was listening to your latest episode of your podcast, Matt. I think it came out today, or the one about why poetry isn't popular.
Oh, okay.
In my yeah. So I listened to half of that, and then Matthew messaged me and said, "Listen to this YouTube video by Eleanor." So I
sorry, I didn't mean to divert you. Yeah.
No, I'll forgive you this time. But so yeah, you say there that criticism is the thing that's hampering poetry. Could you expand on that? So by criticism, do you mean sort of academic critical writing, or do you mean reviews, or do you mean everything? Like, could you just talk about that?
Well, let me say it like this. Like, we all have heard people say when we start talking to them about poetry, shit like, "Oh wow, don't talk to me about that. You're too smart for me. I'm not gonna fucking understand that shit."
Yeah.
Okay, there's a reason why people think that they can't understand poetry, even though they probably grew up reading Dr. Seuss, Shel Silverstein, and what have you. You know, like, people have been introduced to poetry at a young age, and it's fun and the whole thing. But somewhere along the line, something happened to where the majority of the population thinks that poetry is above them and too big for them. So who are the people responsible for that? The people teaching the stuff, the people writing the stuff, and the people talking about the stuff. Like, there's no other people to blame. Right. Something happened somewhere that fucked everything up for everybody.
Yeah. Well, and I think there maybe is there's a distinction worth noting, which is like, also out of fashion are wall tapestries. Like, we don't get a lot of our popular art through wall tapestries these days. But most people wouldn't say like, "Oh man, I don't even know where to begin with wall tapestries." Like, most people wouldn't say, "I'd feel totally unequipped to look at that and say whether it's pretty or not."
But that's not the same thing, because
that's the distinction I'm making. Like, I'm saying, no, but this is part of the distinction I'm making, is just that, like, I think poetry may have become less popular over time anyway, but then on top of that, in addition to that, people became intimidated by it. Like, it's normal for various art forms to fade in and out of relevance, out of popularity, but then what is a little bit artificial with poetry is that there's this additional crust of pretension and intimidation.
But why?
Oh, I think it's mostly because of how it's been taught. I think like Dana Gioia, who's I totally am not on the same page with most of the time.
Oh, is he the one who said you had a party with or something, and he said, oh, what was it? Like, I thought I was the best poet of my generation. And it turned out I was.
He said, I always wanted to be the greatest poet and critic of my generation, and I think I am, is what he said. Yeah. But he is, I mean, curiously, as a new formalist, he kind of blamed the new critics. Not because he thought they were wrong, but because he thought when their observations got picked up by run-of-the-mill school teachers and academics, it got turned into a hard and fast method that then became frustrating and boring and intimidating to people. I think he makes a pretty good argument for that. So I'm totally with you. I do think that I'm totally cynical at academia. I think your cynicism may have a slightly different flavor than mine, but I also think that a lot of secondary school teachers are to blame. I mean, not like individual secondary school teachers who are doing God's work, but like, I think a lot of people get poisoned on poetry before they even get to college.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I agree with both of you there. Yeah, no, the new critics are to blame. Like, I can't see any way of arguing against that. I don't know. I think there is worth in sitting down and talking for 2 hours about a poem's features. Like, So you say this in your podcast, Matt, and I'm probably slightly misquoting you, but like you talk about how it seems you don't say useless, but am I right that it seems useless to you for people to talk about one poem for 2 hours and
No, it's
analyze
not. It's not useless for people to talk about a poem for 2 hours. But I feel like the reasons why people talk about poems for 2 hours is to make the people around them feel fucking stupid. Like, critics want to be the smartest person in the fucking room.
Yeah.
And they don't ever, like, in the podcast, they say a lot of critics say they have open minds, but they never change their fucking mind about anything. So how open is their fucking mind? You know, it's just like, let me see how much bullshit I can fucking throw at the wall talking about this poem. And like, I don't know if you heard the last Poetry Says episode with Eleanor on it, but they were talking about the fucking poem about the fucking humans and the dog.
Yeah.
And like someone was
link.
trying to like say like the meaning about it, and the poet was like going, yeah, you could probably pull meaning, you could probably do this, but it's just crap.
It's like
bullshit.
A joke. It's a funny
exactly.
joke. Yeah.
But like, motherfuckers,
just quickly, if you would,
in
case, I don't know if Cameron, if you heard that yet, but for people who might not have heard that, would you quickly describe this poem? I'll find it and put a link in the show notes. But it's a dog. The title says something like a dog on a. Here, let me fucking find it.
Oh yeah, I did. I only heard I heard fourth.
It like has two words in it, and it's like it says human like 128 times, and then dog. But I guess it's concrete poetry, and it might be in the shape of an airplane.
Yeah, dog is like two-thirds the way. It's buried in there. Dog is like in a middle seat, 2/3 the way down. But it's the words are lined up in a way that is meant to resemble like the seating plan of an airplane. The title is "Dog on a British Airways Airbus 319-100" by Louisa Campbell, and it was shortlisted for the Forward Prize.
I hope it fucking wins. I hope it fucking wins, dude.
I go to a comedy festival to hear something funny. Jesus.
Yeah, I have neither. I mean, I thought it was a funny joke. I don't give a shit about the Forward Prize, but yeah, it didn't impress me much as a poem. But I just thought it was a funny moment. It was like a good bit, you know, which is all I would want it to be. I think, and it seemed like that was all Louisa Campbell wanted it to be.
But like what they were saying on the podcast too is like there's going to be a lot of pissed off poets that poet beat their fucking poem out.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying?
But that also would be true almost no matter what.
I know, but a lot of people are going to be more mad.
This gives them something specific to focus on. This makes it easier to articulate what they're mad about, I guess. So
right to be mad.
So Cameron is apparently one of the poets who is mad about this, but so I actually think that this point in Cameron's sort of challenge might be particularly relevant to your second declaration, Matt. Would you read
I have the
that
declaration.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Because number 2, because I think that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I totally want.
So are we gonna go past form? Because we
did.
Can I just ask about
form?
Yeah. Sorry, Matt. Can I?
No, you're cool.
So you associate form mostly with metrical and rhyming poems, right? Like when I hear you talk about form, it's mostly to do with assonance, consonants, and you talk about whether people put them in, and you talk about meter and rhyme.
Like when I'm talking vaguely about it, but I understand that there are numerous different kinds of forms and ways of doing things. But then to me, that's just plagiarism. And that's probably going to piss everybody off too.
Wait. Sorry. Just clarify, if you will, what you're saying exactly.
Explain that?
Okay, a form becomes a form because somebody did it, and then somebody copied it and said, "Wow, this is cool. Look, this is now a form. Let's all do this." And everyone's like, "Okay, hold my beer. Let me do the thing that you did. I will copy you." It's just, it's so like, I know that a lot of people like it, and I understand its historical reference. I personally don't really care for it.
Okay, 2 points. Like, yes and no, in that, yeah, you're right, but also no one writes in dactylic hexameter like Homer does, but everyone writes sonnets. So my throwback would be some forms, I think, have some kind of bearing to the psychology of human beings. Like I can see patterns of thought in the form of a sonnet, and I'm not talking about
Well,
rhyming scheme.
when did
I'm talking about like
sonnets
argument and counter argument.
when were sonnets created? When was the term sonnet coined?
Sonnet, I think it was
term sonnet.
sonnetina is an Italian term, and it was a
It means little song, right? So
yeah.
did Petrarch, did he?
I don't think
He didn't even write sonnets.
I don't think he invented it. Petrarch did write sonnets, but he didn't.
Did he like? Are they sonnets?
Yeah.
Are they okay?
Yeah, because
Okay.
like the Wyatt poem, Who Shall List a Hunt, is almost a translation.
Yeah, that's a sonnet, but that
No, but I mean,
But like
that's
a
almost like a translation of a Petrarch sonnet, I believe.
yeah. Okay, no, I'm being too strict. Like I just wondered if Petrarch's poems are 14 lines because of like the translation of the Tanzania I have. A lot of the poems aren't 14.
They're not 14 lines. Oh,
not
shit.
a lot of like some of them aren't. Like no, I don't know. Some of them might be,
Yeah.
but the ones I have aren't.
And I also he also didn't do pentameter. He did hendecasyllabics or something. But it was like was
it iambic?
I don't know.
Must have been iambic. Is Italian not a naturally iambic language?
I think it was alternate. I think the stresses were alternating, but I think they might have just been hendecasyllables. Well, I'm sure Shane's screaming at his microphone or his earphones right now. But it's like a early Renaissance Italian development. I think. Like
okay, so were sonnets done before then?
That is a good question. So
yeah.
So Matthew, I think, hinges on this point by correcting me and our debate about whether Petrarch's sonnets were sonnets, because I'm wrong here in that I think Petrarch's poems are sonnets whether they're 14 lines or not. It's about the structure of argument, counter-argument, and sometimes conclusion, sometimes diversion. Moving from, if we listen to Petrarch or Shakespeare.
Sure.
But I think that structuring of poetry has been around for like eternity. Like I reckon if you go through Sappho, you could find pretty similar structures. So I think
were those structures made for that purpose, or was that just like, yes, there are some sonnets in this giant piece of other work that you could look back and go, oh yes, now I can see that there was a sonnet here.
I think you're getting you're getting the cart before the horse a little bit. Because I think like the reason because what like the old rhetorical form.
Me or Matt?
Matt. I think Matt.
Probably.
The old rhetorical form that I think of as being like related to that sonnet volta argument, because you're right, Cameron. Like in a way, like the most interesting formal component of the sonnet is the rhetorical form, not the metrical form, but the rhyme scheme. The old rhetorical form that I think of as being an ancestor of that is the priamel, which is, or the preamel, however you say it, which is not this, not this, not this, but that, which is like the Sappho's Anactoria poem is famously like a very clean example of a sonnet. She's a very priamel, where she says like, some people say that the best sight is this, others say it's this, others say it's that, I say it's you. It's like a great, it's a great move. And I think like that rhetorical form, that move didn't become a form because lots of people said, I want to do that. It turned into itself over time because it worked. Like people tried a lot of different things and some of them worked better than others.
But did people do it on their own, or did someone say, oh, I should tell everyone that they should do this thing?
I think at least in terms of most poets who were worth their salt do things because they think they will sound good and they will work. Like I think all poets copy one another, but I think the ones who are the ones like I read, I'm assuming they didn't say, oh, the rules say I'm supposed to write a poem this way. I'm thinking they said, oh shit, that guy's poem was great. I want to do something like that.
Yeah, like,
but now,
go ahead, Cameron. Sorry. No. Like I was just going to say, the people who adopted the strict sonnet form did so, yes, because other people were doing it, but also, at least the best of them did it because they recognized that brought out sort of a blatant formalistic technique that was residing in their own writing, and the sort of strict sonnet form gave that a sort of fully fledged gracefulness.
Whoa, wait, you're saying that like the sonnet was within them all along?
Yeah.
And they had basically like they recognized something that would bring out an existing quality of their own poetic impulse.
Right, yeah.
That's like some like Harold Bloom spiritual guru shit there. Like, all right. I can't say no, but wow, all right, I don't know.
But yeah, I mean,
You-
it's you can't argue it because it's a guess throwing a rock in a fucking pond, like so like I mean, but that's the whole thing. Like so much stuff that is being taught and forced on people as this is what this is all based on speculation of do we even know what these motherfuckers were thinking and what was happening before those motherfuckers thought that.
Yeah, I mean, but I think some of that it comes again. Like I think the culprit there is bad teaching, not bad. Like I don't think that poets.
So what makes it bad teaching?
It doesn't identify what is there to love to begin with, and like I think any teaching of poetry that doesn't take its foundation from this sounds good or I like this gives
But
pleasure
all
in some
that's
way.
subjective though. That's all subjective
Right,
shit.
but I think as with cooking, as with any other art, I think there's no accounting for taste, but there's some accounting for taste. Like you can say like we like. I mean, again, we're talking about French fries and urine. Like you can make some meaningful predictions about what people will like, and like and some of that is acquired, but I don't think it's
I was gonna say that's definitely gonna be the title of this episode.
French fries and urine.
French fries and urine. Like it has to be. It has
Featuring Matt Wall. Yeah, there you
Yeah.
so there.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah,
stuff.
like I think like a good poetry class should at least have some kinship to like a good cooking class, a good or like not even cooking, maybe like food appreciation or music appreciation, where like the goal is not to become a professor. The goal is to be able to enjoy this stuff in your own life, right? I think like that, and to enjoy it in a way that is, knowing more about it does help you enjoy it more. Like when I have gotten interested in an art form, there are times when I can find it stultifying to like take in a bunch of facts about it. But generally speaking, learning more about it helps me enjoy it more. And I think like teaching art of all kinds should lead with pleasure. Like pleasure should always be
But this
the
is all
guide.
subjective. That's the whole thing. That's the whole bitch. Like everything we're talking about is subjective, how we feel about it. Do we love it? Do we enjoy it? Is there pleasure in it? That's all subjective. That's not an objective thing. And so the teaching of poetry has become this is an objective thing that you are subjectively supposed to like because I tell you to. That
I don't
doesn't
know.
make sense.
Okay, so then this is where I wonder also about our various experiences with academia. Like I've had more than my fair share and more than I care to have. Like I don't, I've had a lot of experiences with bad teachers in college. My experience was certainly not that. I mean, on very few occasions did I have teachers say, this is objectively good and this is objectively bad and you should like this or you shouldn't like that. I certainly had a couple say like, I would like to see you do more with this than with that, or I would, like this kind of thing pleases me. And I actually got into an argument with like a bad argument with a teacher in college because he said this poem fails. He wasn't talking about mine. He was talking about someone else's poem. And I said, no, I think there's some value in it. And he said, no, there's not. God damn it. So that was one of the few times I encountered something like a kind of a hard wall there. But for the most part, it was subjectivity all the way down. Like, I mean, for the most part, it was not, like the new critics were anathema to the people who taught me poetry in college. Like they were very much, they rejected any kind of objective criteria for teaching poetry. Cameron, I mean, I know the times change, but you are at least sort of in the mix with that right now. What is your experience?
Well, like as I always say, we are not being taught a lot of poetry. But, like I'm not on a creative writing course. I'm on an English literature course, so I'm not like no one's looking at poems we're writing. I not like
oh no but even
reading
like
books
presumably you're reading some poems that somebody wrote.
Yeah. So I'm trying. So I've had one. Okay, so we did 20th. So this last year we've done 20th century, 21st century literature.
I'm sorry, you're fading out at the end of your sentence.
Sorry. Shit, I'm just moving around. Okay. This year we did 20th century and 21st century literature. On the reading list who were poets were Yeats, Eliot, Whitman, and Dickinson.
There's a dream reading list for you, Matt, right?
But we had, so the reading list, you get basically the tutor puts a lot of shit on the reading list, and we have a seminar once a week about some of the writers on the reading list.
Yeah.
Out of all those poets, by the way, they're the only poets given to us to represent poetry in the 20th and 21st century and 19th century. Like, apparently they're what sort of our tutor thought were the only poets of note, I guess, as she put them on there. The only poet we actually talked about that was T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland. And to be fair to her, yeah, I swear you hate this poem, Matt. I love this poem. Like, it's not going well.
I hate more what he did it for than the poem itself. Because I actually like parts of the poem, but whatever. Okay.
Yeah. That's fair enough. Like, what he did it for is pretty morally cute. But, like, I love the poem. But we had a lesson with our tutor. She never said it was objectively good or anything, or we should like it. I mean, she never says we should like anything. She normally says, "Oh, this book by Henry James is one of my favorite books," and then does a really good sort of an analysis of what's good about it. And most of those things are technical. And when we came to The Wasteland, she mainly talked about it was about the carved scene of I never know how to say it. Was it Philomela or Philomela? I can't. How do you say it?
I think sometimes I used to say Philomela, but then I think Philomela or Philomela because that's I think of the Donne. No, it's not. Is it? No, it's not Donne. Sorry, the Raleigh poem where he Philomel is. Oh, Ellie, baby, what's going on?
Whoa.
Can you do this?
Sorry, y'all go ahead. I'm going to paint some sparkly fingernails for a second.
Sure.
I'm listening.
So, no, what?
Yeah, sorry. You were going on. Yeah.
No. What was I saying? Something about some woman whose name we can't pronounce. Philomel. It says in the.
Yeah, Philomel.
Yeah, her. She says in the poem something like a picture of Philomel carved on the wall, and like the tutor gave us a lesson about. Well, she talked about sort of implications of sexual violence in the poem and sort of Eliot's overtones. She made a quite interesting point about how Eliot was less sexist than he seems and like was making interesting commentary on the abuse of women. But that's sort of that's my only encounter with poetry and academia. This year we're going to do a lot of medieval literature, so that's basically all going to be poetry. So like I'm going to have more poetry, but none of it's going to be contemporary. So like that's my basic encounter with poetry and academia.
Yeah. Whereas when I was in college, and granted, I was not an English major, so but like in the creative writing classes I took, we read nothing that had not been written within like the previous 30 years. It was like all like ultra contemporary.
That's insane.
It's totally insane. It's totally insane. I think it's totally insane. Yeah.
But Matt, what's your if any, what's your experience with academia, and what led you to form these views?
Well, I'm gonna blow your guys' minds right now that I was a philosophy major. So
okay, yeah, that checks out.
Yeah, check this out. Yeah, no, I was a philosophy major and I minored in sociology, and then after 3 years, I said I don't want to do this anymore.
Wise man.
World, yeah.
Fair enough.
So that's it. And like honestly, I just have this, and maybe it comes from philosophy teachers, but I don't think it does because I could go back to high school with this too. But I just really have this feeling that the reason why poetry is taught in such an obscure and obtuse way is to save their fucking jobs. Because if everyone knew that poetry was simple and poetry was easy and anyone can do it, why the fuck would there be people teaching it? And how can they like hold their status in the community if it was something available and open to everyone? And this goes right back to Eliot and the fucking Wasteland. You know, like fuck me. Yeah.
Ellie, baby, not right here because it's making loud noises here.
Wish someone would come paint my fucking nails, dude.
No, I was just saying Matt had just hit the wasteland. Like
The
I was getting
wasteland,
ready for his attack on it. Or,
Okay,
like, his
yeah.
attack
Do you
on
want
it.
do you want to do you
Yeah.
want to give an attack on the wasteland as a? Well, it sounds like your attack is not on the poem
Yeah.
so much as on
It's not
his motives.
so much on the poem as it exactly.
Okay.
And what a piece of shit. Can you just say
Well,
that?
do you want to articulate what that is? Like what it is that you
He
object to?
purposefully wrote the wasteland in a way that not anyone would understand, and people would have to talk about and discuss and all this other shit. And the thing that bothers me about it is if we talk about like what was his purpose in the actual poem itself, like what was he trying to get across? What was the thing that was like crushing his soul that he had to get out on paper? Like, why would he keep that to an elite group of people to decide what his art was instead of giving it to the masses? It's a piece of shit fucking move, and he's a motherfucker for it. I don't care if he wrote cat poems or not.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna disagree with this. Like,
Okay.
firstly, isn't the wasteland pretty easy to understand? Like, if you just like throw away all the foreign languages and whatever, like I think anyone, if you read it, can work out. This guy is saying, "I'm sad with modernity. I'm very depressed," and that's a pretty accurate summary of the
but
wasteland.
I think like you said, like let's throw out all the foreign language. Like you just lost a significant portion of the poem there. Like you like there's I think like it is not. Even if I think you're right,
like,
you can read through the poem, you can get a pretty strong sense of like the lyric motion of it. It is you would not be a fool to come to that cold and say what the fuck is going on. Like
And
that's not
my
not
argument with this is, and like forget me being here, forget us being here. If you like were to type in like on Google or YouTube, like what does this poem mean? There would probably be the wasteland more than any other poem. And there would be 100 different videos, 100 different articles about people describing what that means. The only reason why that would happen is if the majority of people didn't know what the fuck it meant. So yes, there are going to be people who fucking understand it. There are going to be people who could fucking just chew that fucking language up and understand everything and be fucking fine with it. But for the majority of people, they're not going to fucking get it.
Yeah. Like when people write about the sonnets, they like Shakespeare sonnets, they don't write what do they mean? They write like who was the dark lady, right? Or like was Shakespeare gay? Like they ask those kind of questions because like it's not hard to follow what they mean because they're pretty fucking clear. I mean, it's early modern English, but I think like there are obscure moments, but overall you're not running into a wall the way that I think you often do in the Wasteland.
Sure. But like on a side note, have you heard of the J.H. Prynne book? Like I can't remember the number of the sonnet, but do you know the sonnet where it's like those who can move others but are not moved? What's the phrasing? Like is it sonnet 96? Probably not. But do you know that one? Like there's a whole book on that one about what it means.
I guess I'm not surprised by that, but I think like that may be the exception that proves the rule with this. Like at least with the sonnets, I think like it's that is. I mean, because I think like my biggest objection at the Wasteland, which I love, like I read it, and I think when I heard Robert Penn Warren's experience with it was that he read it, he had no idea what was going on, but he was entranced by it. He thought it was beautiful, and he painted a bunch of stuff on his dorm room walls because he just thought it was cool. And I think like that was basically my response. I thought like this is so fucking cool. And then when like I was glad to spend more time with it later. My biggest objection to it is its the wake that it left, because then people have been doing that shit, doing deliberately obscure poetry for a century since then, and that's what drives me crazy about it. I think.
Preach.
Yeah.
Yes. That's agreed. Because I really like the first two parts of the Wasteland. The first two parts I love, and then but then I just started. I'm like, okay, fuck this, whatever. But yeah,
and his rendering of the road to Emmaus, I think, is like I'm not a Christian, but like that made that particular story even more poignant. I think like there's I mean, I love Eliot. I love like so much of what he wrote, but I think whatever his intentions with that poem, and I do think that he is self-deprecating in some of the notes in a way that I think has gotten lost a little bit. Like he is sort of making fun of his own obscurity there, but the precedent it set and the model people took it to be, I think, has been pretty deadly for a lot of poetry. But Cameron, you find obscure poetry friendlier, or maybe you find more poetry less obscure. I'm not sure how about it.
I don't know if I find it less obscure. I don't know. I just don't mind reading it. I don't think I get. I don't think I'm troubled if a poem's difficult or obscure.
So what were you saying, Cameron?
Just now I was saying I don't know. I really find it hard to phrase, but like I don't mind if a poem's difficult. I don't mind if I don't understand a poem. I think I don't. That is not to say that I don't think a poem should be like non-understandable, and
Yeah.
I think I get tired of poems when I think there's nothing to understand, but I don't really mind. Like on a first reading, the understanding of the poem is not my top priority, I think. I don't come to a poem and think, can I understand it? No. Okay, I'm gone. Like that's not how I read the poem to me.
Yeah.
But like that might not even be how you read it. Like so if you come to a poem, Matt, how do you read?
Like
How,
honestly, for me, the thing
Yeah.
I want more than anything is that I want the poem to ask me a question. Like
Okay.
if I had anything, that would be it. So the poem has to ask a question. I have to, after I read it, go like, oh shit, like fuck, and like contemplate whatever the fuck it is I have to contemplate. You know, and when things become super obscure and you don't even know what the fuck the question is, it's like, why the fuck are we talking? Like,
Okay.
I wouldn't talk to another human being like that. If my boss talked to me like that, I'd quit my fucking job.
Yeah.
If a woman fucking talked to me like that, and believe me, I love women way more than I fucking love poetry. But if a woman fucking talked to me like that, I would be out the fucking door. So why am I letting a poet talk to me in fucking weird little games and shit when I just want to know what the fuck you're talking about so we can continue the conversation?
The difference for me is that like there are sometimes things that I look for in conversation that I don't look for elsewhere, and vice versa. Like the things I look for in literature that I don't aren't the same thing that I look for in conversation. Like for example, I love plot. It's really fashionable right now to trash plot in fiction and to dismiss the importance of plot. I love plot. I think plot's great.
Yeah.
And I love a plotty movie. I love a plotty novel, play. I want to see forward motion, forward action. I have been friends with a few people who have turned their life into a propulsive plot. That's fucking awful. Like that's horrible. I don't want plot from my personal relationships. Like I don't want schemes and drama and like secret motivations and surprises and reversals. I don't want that in my. So like there are things I go to literature for that are not the things I go to conversation for, and I think that's true for poetry. Like I wouldn't want to talk to somebody who spoke in fucking rhyme, but I do enjoy rhyming poetry. So like I think that is there, but I think Cameron may have a stronger disagreement with, I suspect, with what you said.
I guess I'd put into a metaphor like this. Instead of treating the poem as someone talking to me, I'd probably treat the poem as sort of a world made out of language. Or maybe not a world, but like a landscape or an environment made out of language that I could move among. I'm quite proud of that myself. I think that's a pretty good, I've been trying to articulate this for like loads of episodes. I think that is my relationship to a poem.
So
It's a
do you
landscape.
really like speculative poetry?
Define speculative poetry.
Like poetry that's like kind of like science fiction based or horror based or things of the unknown.
I really like speculative fiction. Speculative poetry, I don't think I'd like it any more or any less than any other type of poetry. Like I don't think the alienness of the landscape would be the thing that fascinates me. It would be like how the landscape of language is put together. And this is why I'm going to break the metaphor slightly. It'd be like the phrase making and how the meaning interacts with the language. That's what would.
So you don't care if the poet says like I leaned up on this tree, but he called it like a gobbledygook, and you didn't know what the fuck he was talking about because he's painting a landscape, and he could call a tree whatever the fuck he wants to call a tree, and it could be totally obscure and weird, and it doesn't bother you.
I wouldn't care at first. What I'd eventually ask, if I found the poem worth enough to keep reading, what I'd eventually ask the poem is, what is the reason behind calling this tree by a specific name, and does that add anything to the landscape of the poem and of the language? So like I wouldn't care.
No, that's good.
I wouldn't care about the obscurity on a first reading. Like I wouldn't get pissed off on the first time round a poem that the tree was not called a tree. But after a while, if I liked the poem enough, I'd start questioning why he called the tree by a specific name instead of.
I understand.
Yeah. For me, like that kind of move where they're big patches that I just skid over because I can't follow them, that tends to discourage me from coming back to a poem. And that is my experience. But Cameron, I'm actually really curious now, because we've talked a little bit about synesthesia for a variety of reasons in previous episodes. And I'm now wondering, like when I read anything, and it's one of the reasons I'm such a slow reader, I have to, in my mind's ear, hear the voice of somebody saying the words. Like I can't read any faster than the sounds of the words could be made. Do you hear words in your head when you read, or do you experience something differently? Because I'm even wondering if like the tactile experience you have reading is part of this.
Tactile experience is part. I don't know about that, Matthew. Maybe not to a big extent, though. I don't think I'd love a poem if I thought the letters were well made. No, sorry, I'm ignoring your first point.
Yeah.
The problem is, I hear a lot of poems.
And I don't mean that like they feel nice on your fingertips. I definitely don't mean that. I just mean like I'm curious about how you process the words. Right.
So, like,
yeah. The phone book would feel nice. Yeah.
I read the poem, and sometimes I get speech software and shit to read the poem out at the same time. So I'm reading it tactilely and auditory at the same time. So like I'm hearing a voice say it. The voice isn't really human. But like the big thing is I don't care about the poem. I don't care that the poem's words, I can't imagine those words spoken by an ordinary human being. And in fact, I find that sometimes exciting. Like I find the alienness of the voice, or the newness of the voice, or the idiosyncrasy of the voice exciting in its own right. And I don't think that's sort of the key thing a poet should aim for, but that is part of the enjoyment.
But this is I totally, I think that is like a real difference between how you and I experience poetry. But I'm actually even curious about like a more fundamental understanding of voice. Like even before you get to the place where you say like, would a person say this? Is this how people talk? I mean, literally, like I have to experience it auditorially, even if I'm not reading it aloud. Like I have a hard time. Like I can't read any faster than I can imagine the sounds of the word being said. But I know a lot of people read, like Joanna reads so fast, she's not hearing anything in her head. She's just whipping her eyes over the words. So I'm curious what your internal experience, I mean, but it sounds like sometimes your experience is literally touching something while hearing it at the same time.
Yeah. No, yeah, that's probably going to hamper it. But like, I don't think I could go without hearing the words in my head. Like I wouldn't want to. And I think that happens to me.
For real.
Right, that was this week's show. There, as I said, there will be more to come of this conversation, and maybe I'll put the rest out sooner rather than later on the Secret Show feed. I think it is a lot of fun, and we get some like sort of get into some sort of thorny questions in the next couple sections about whether Cameron's method of revising poems is, as I suggest, totally wrong-headed and terrible, or whether Matt Wall is in fact an Instapoet influencer. But it was a lot of fun, and I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll enjoy the rest to come. If you want to write me about this or anything, boy, already getting some strong opinions about good old Amit Majmudar. Boy, I love he is such a good sport, and people have very strong feelings. But write me about that or anything at sleerickets@gmail.com. Thank you, and with any luck, I will be speaking to you again very soon. Until then.